I just think it's kind of ridiculous to assume that the second largest economy in the world pivots based on one letter from one CEO.
Chamath Palihapitiya, venture capitalist and economic commentator, reacts to the latest revelations Kevin O'Leary made on the endorsement worth $15 million which he gave to FTX. Should Mr. O'Leary refund this money to the victims of the FTX scam? Also in today's video, Mr. Chamath also speaks on the issue of China and the US demography, which is proving to be not very economically advantageous. Welcome to the channel. If you're new, subscribe to get in-depth analysis of interviews just like this one.
I don't think it's fair to pick on Kevin O'Leary per se, because there is a bunch of those guys that took money from him. You know, a bunch of athletes did, probably
Senators,
a bunch of movie stars,
PACs,
you know,
Republicans,
Democrats.
Yeah,
like everybody got paid by this guy.
Democrats.
So again, just like in the Twitter example, I think it's important in this case to generalize, because the generalized thing is the real problem. Look, if you want to focus on the crux of this, you have a concept in law that Sachs knows better than the rest of us called fraudulent conveyance. And we have example after example where it does not matter whether it was in the Bernie Madoff example or, for example, Jason, we talked about it, the guy in LA that lost all that money, client funds playing poker.
Yep.
You have to give the money back, especially if it was fraudulently conveyed to you.
Can you explain this in detail for a second so the audience understands?
Well, my understanding, which is very basic, and I think David can probably do a much better job, is the following, which is if you get money some way, but it comes from somebody who fraudulently acquired that money, you have to give the money back. So in this example, what it would mean is if that they can show that that $15 million that this guy got came from SBF basically raiding the piggy bank of user accounts, he's going to have to pay the money back. Just like, for example, in the Madoff fraud, the folks that went to find the money were able to go back to folks that actually redeemed even the beginning early ones and said, I understand that you didn't know any better, but this was fraudulently conveyed to you, so we need the money back. And they got the money back.
Sam Bankman-Fried has been compared to Bernie Madoff, the man that carried out the largest Ponzi scheme in US history. His fraudulent operation had cost a whopping $64.8 billion. At its peak, Sam's operation was worth $32 billion. All that money now has virtually disappeared. Chamath Palihapitiya draws parallels between the two cases, particularly in the area of restitutions. It's his belief that the beneficiaries of Sam's largesse, which constitutes a long list of celebrities, should pay back the money that they received from Sam. Mr. Chamath thinks that this is the right thing to do, just as the beneficiaries of Mr. Madoff did when they discovered that the assets and monies they'd made were from a Ponzi operation. One of those that made a restitution was a friend of Madoff, whose estate had agreed to pay back $7.2 billion in settlement to the victims of the scam. Victims trustee Irving Picard and the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office announced the agreement reached for the refunded funds. With this settlement, Picard has recovered almost half of the money he believes Madoff stole, making it by far the largest settlement to date. Among the biggest beneficiaries of Madoff's decades-long scam is billionaire Jeffrey Picard. According to Picard, he earned 950% on his investments with Madoff in just 1 year. So the question is, can this apply in the case of FTX, its subsidiaries, and those that benefited from the proceeds of the fraudulent company? We're talking about people like Kevin O'Leary, who confessed he received $15 million from Sam to be a spokesperson for the brand. Reactions have trailed Mr. O'Leary's revelation that he was earning such a high amount to promote FTX. Chamath differs with popular opinion that Kevin O'Leary should be criticised for receiving such money. He thinks it was okay he was paid for his promotion of FTX, but the question is, where did the money come from? Regardless of Mr. O'Leary's guilt or innocence, he should endeavour to return that money. But FTX is not the only thing happening in the finance world. A lot is happening in China as well, and Chamath talks about that next.
Baiji, phase 1 was to consolidate power. Phase 2 was to get through November and to basically get reappointed for life and dispel any other, rivals that he actually had. And now phase 3 is just to reopen the economy again so this guy can basically sit on top of the second largest economy in the world. So I think this is sort of a natural flow of things. The other part of it, which I think is being underreported, is I think that the way in which they did it was less responsive, in my opinion, to a letter from Uncle Terry, but was more responsive to the fact that there are people on the ground. And I think that these guys are getting very sophisticated in understanding how to give the Chinese people some part of what they want so that they're roughly happy enough to keep moving forward. And I'm not going to morally judge whether it's right or wrong, but it's just a comment on what the gameplay and the game theory seems to be coming from the leadership of China. So I think it's good for the Chinese people. And the real question is, what will it mean for the U.S. economy if these guys get their economy going again?
First week of this month, China finally decided to start easing on its extremely harsh COVID-19 restrictions. It initially seemed natural that they should do this because it was really slowing down the republic's ability to maintain its GDP, but it was more than just that. It took the intervention of Foxconn CEO Terry Gou for Beijing to start easing on the restrictions. So why is this important? Well, Foxconn is Apple's manufacturer in China, and they've been unable to keep their supply chain running effectively because of the harsh COVID restrictions on the country. Resuming manufacturing operations would have an impact on the economy. So what should the United States look forward to?
I've said this before, and I've been tweeting about this for years, but people so poorly understand demographics. Everybody thinks that we have a surplus of people, and we don't. And we need to have a positive birth rate in order to kind of continue to support the expansion of the world and GDP. And we need that. And right now, we're not in that situation. If you look at a country-by-country basis, a lot of these countries are facing that in a pretty cataclysmic way. The most sensitive country to this is China. I mean, their population at current course and speed, I think the last number is it's going to halve by 2100. There'll be about 600 million people in China, which is unbelievably disruptive in a very negative way for them, right? Because you will have a lot of people who are entering the workforce having to support an entire cohort of people above them in terms of age, right? Who are retired, etc. So the state's going to have to get much, much more actively involved over the next 50 years in China. And then you look at other countries like Nigeria or India, who are in, at the beginning of what could be a multi-decade boom, because you have 20-year-olds that will be entering the workforce. They'll effectively work for less than their older counterparts, right? So then there'll be an incentive then to bring work onshore into those countries. And so it's going to have huge impacts, because then you have rising GDP, you'll have rising expectations of living quality, you'll have rising expectations of how governments treat those people. So it's all kind of positive in general, but the world needs more people. Let's just be clear, especially in Western countries. We're not as badly off as China, but we're not far behind.
The summary is, economic growth is slowing down in developed countries such as the United States, and the population demography plays a huge role. It's a consumer-driven economy, and the consumers are dwindling. This would affect not just the economy, but the financial and equities market too, so be sure to plan appropriately. Thanks for watching. Like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed, and be sure to hit the bell icon. But until next time, we'll see you in the next video.